Hello everyone, my name is Tasha Sturm and today we are going to look at the human microbiome and we are going to be exploring the skin's microbial world. Here are some things to think about as we go along through the presentation. What is a microbiome? Ecosystems, the who, the what, and the where. What does skin do? Microenvironments in humans? What affects the skin's microbiome? What is the importance of the skin's microbiome? So let's get started. First, let's look at what is a microbiome. Microbiomes are collections of different microorganisms such as bacteria, fungus, viruses, mites, and phages, all living in an environment or an ecosystem together. When we look at microbiomes, we look at how organisms interact with each other as well as how they interact with their environment. So when you think of a microbiome, what type of ecosystem or environment do you think of? Most of us think of plants and soil and how they interact with the bacteria in their environment. Today, we're going to look at a different type of environment. Humans. Yes, humans are their own ecosystem with a number of microenvironments associated with the body. Now, these microenvironments all have different factors, such as different oxygen or different pH levels, and that affects the microorganisms or the microbiome that lives in those areas, such as the mouth and the lungs, the digestive tract, the stomach and the intestines, the urogenital tract, like the bladder. But today we're going to look at the skin, which is the largest environment on the human body. And we're going to look at the microorganisms or the microbiome associated with the skin. So let's take a look at what our skin does. As I mentioned earlier, the skin is the largest organ in the body and is constantly shedding dead skin cells and making new ones. It's our first line of defense, an immune defense, against pathogens. And as long as it's intact, it is great against protecting us against infections. It can be a physical barrier, absorbing harmful UV rays from the sun. It prevents evaporation from either heat or wind. And it helps cool the body with sweat. Now, if you look at the skin, it looks like it's one layer. But if you take a microscopic look at the skin, you will see that it is actually 3 layers, with the hypodermis being the bottom, the dermis being the middle, and the epidermis being the outermost layer, which comes in contact with the environment. If you take an even closer microscopic look at the skin, you will see that there are a number of different microorganisms that can be found on and within the skin, and this is our microbiome. Now that we know the structure of the skin, let's look at the skin's unique microenvironments throughout the body, remembering that microenvironments are small environments that differ in some way from the larger environment in which they live. So as you look at this, what do you notice about the different microenvironments? You'll see that some are oily and warm, others are warm and moist, and yet others are dry and exposed to the environment. So here's a fun fact. The belly button is known as the tropical rainforest of the skin microbiome because it is so isolated and sheltered from the rest of the skin. There are scientists who spend their entire careers studying nothing but the belly button microbiome. So what makes these microenvironments what they are? If you remember, we talked in the last slide about the skin and the different layers. In the middle layer, or the dermis of the skin, there are 3 different types of sweat glands. The sebaceous gland, the apocrine gland, and at the very end we'll talk about the eccrine gland. Now the sebaceous gland is responsible for oily skin. It produces sebaceous oils. Overproduction can cause clogged pores, and it also feeds a bacteria called Cutibacterium acneus, and it causes pimples. Moist skin, especially under the arms and in the groin area where there is secondary hair growth is fed by the apocrine gland. Now, this gland does not really start producing sweat until you hit puberty. The staph and the corynebacteria that are dominant in those areas feed on the sweat from the apocrine gland and produce a smell, also known as body odor. Dry skin has bacteria associated with it, and it also has the third and last skin gland called the eccrine gland. The eccrine gland is sweat, and it is high in salt and other antimicrobial substances such as free fatty acids and antimicrobial peptides, and plays a role in controlling the diversity of the skin. It's also how you lose a lot of your electrolytes when you sweat. Now that we've looked at the diversity of microenvironments on the human skin, let's look at why our microbiome is so important. Basically, bacteria get shelter and nutrients from us, and we can get immune protection and nutrients from them. Did you notice on the last slide that one of the bacterial names was highlighted in a different color? That bacteria is Staphylococcus epidermidis, which inhabits the majority of the skin on the human body, and it takes up a lot of space. By taking up so much space, it makes it difficult for other bacteria to find room to grow. It also puts out antimicrobial properties that help defend against pathogenic bacteria like Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So what affects the skin and the microbiome? A lot of things, including metabolism, age and climate, chemicals, antibiotics, gender, hydration, and hygiene, just to name a few. So let's take a look at one of these. Let's look at age. When a person is born as an infant, they have a very limited microbiome, and it has to develop over time. Once they start toddling and become kids, up to about 8 years of age, is when they have the most diverse and abundant microbiome with bacteria like Streptococcus, which makes sense because hopefully they're out playing in the dirt and having a good time. Once they hit puberty, they start to lose diversity and they become more like an adult biome. Hopefully this is because of better hygiene, but they also have new hormones that they're not used to, which a lot of times are in flux. So this means their microbiome is not very stable until they hit adulthood, which then has a stable microbiome, but it's also a less diverse microbiome. Remember that they can still be affected by diet and hygiene and a host of other outside effects. In the elderly population, the skin starts to break down, which means the immune system is now breaking down. They have a decrease in hormones and oil, and they have a decrease in diversity. Unfortunately, this means they become more susceptible to disease. So now, let's have some fun. Microbial handprints, a fun and simple way to look at the microbes on a hand. We do this by pressing our hands into an agar plate. That agar contains all of the nutrients bacteria need to survive. Then we incubate at body temperature and see what grows. A fun experiment is doing an unwashed handprint. Then we scrub our hands really good with soap and water, and we do another handprint after washing. Do you see the difference between the two handprints? What do you think that difference is? At the same time, we like to do environmental swabs, like tabletops, handrails, and even the bottom of our shoe. If you look at this picture from a bacteria from a shoe swab, does it look similar to the one in the unwashed handprint? In fact, it's the same bacteria called Bacillus mycoides, which is a common soil bacteria. Is that bacteria part of our normal microbiome? Nope. I like to call them environmental hitchhikers. As we go throughout our day, touching different surfaces, we pick up other bacteria along the way. Is it something we should be afraid of? Remember, our skin is a part of our immune system, and as long as it's intact with no cuts, we should be fine. Thank you for taking a tour of the skin microbiome with me. And remember, You are never alone, so be kind to your microbiome.